Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day out there. We are having a great day here with, well, I was thinking about, waking up with Cerberus and all that good stuff. How about Cerberus woke me up? That would be a very true statement this morning out here in the People's Democratic Republic of Northern Virginia. Cerberus did wake me up. It gave me the jolt I needed, a little bit of reality in a fantasy land of spending. And we'll talk a little bit about spending later on, to the tune of $2 trillion. But first, let's talk about the lineup in the crowd. We have Suzanne Sherman from the hinterlands of Utah, the Booger Man. He's out there, kids. You can't hide from him. And Mr. Jeff Johnson, our super producer, who is always producing. Suzanne, take us through the legal stuff.
Well, first, I'm going to give you a little weather update. Good morning, everybody from the hinterlands of Utah. It is May 1st. I wake up and say, yay, it's May 1st. Spring is here. And Utah says, here, have some snow. In fact, here, have a lot of snow.
What?
Utah's just being dumb. I'm looking out the window. It looks like a snow globe here. So that's our little weather update. And, this too shall pass. I had a nice week in Arizona last week. I got to warm up a little bit, but now it's time to chill a little bit more. We're not quite done yet. Want to remind everybody, follow us on Facebook. We've got new members in the CRN fan page. Thank you very much for joining. We see these Facebook algorithms, and I still have people seeing our notices going, hey, how do I listen to your show? Facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. SoundCloud, Cerberus Radio Network. YouTube, Cerberus Radio Network. Are we seeing a pattern here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? Cerberus is spelled Cerberus. When we were trying to find a name for the network, I came across that. And one of the definitions was a formidable and surly guardian. I thought, well, that's perfect for us. Hence our tagline, defending liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. It's what we try to do, folks. Jeff Johnson here, manning the controls. Thank you very much, Jeff. Again, he's taking care of the YouTube live chat. So if you have anything that you want to contribute, he will get it to me. I will try and open my Facebook Messenger and keep that open. If you have stuff, I will try and keep track of that. People send me texts as well. Because we have Junk Bond and Booger here, we're going to really get into what's going on in Venezuela. We've been talking behind the scenes. These guys have some amazing insight. Before we get to that, though, I just want to give you a quick update. Also, you can find all of these pages I mentioned, the SoundCloud and YouTube, on SuzanneCSherman.com. Junk Bond has generously volunteered to help with the Cerberus Radio Network website. But until you guys get that, you can go to SuzanneCSherman.com. Go to the social media bars. You can find YouTube and SoundCloud on there as well. My blogs, articles, all linked in one happy location. Little bit of information out of Charlottesville, and I have to say I'm a bit conflicted on the case. My good friend Carl Jones, he was the co-author of our article published by the 10th Amendment Center on National Reciprocity. At the time this lawsuit commenced, he was he was chief of heritage operations for Sons of Confederate Veterans. They filed a suit to prevent the statues of Generals Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson from being removed. And the article here discusses it and ties it to a nationalist white supremacy event. I'm not going to degrade these gentlemen's memories by tying it into this, but here, a Virginia judge, this article says, has ruled that the statues of these generals are protected war monuments and cannot be removed from the city without permission from state officials. Those of you that know me might know where I'm kind of conflicted on this issue, but let me continue with the relevant portion of the article here. Circuit Court Judge Richard E. Moore said that neither the intentions of the people who erected these statues, they say controversial statues. I say they're only controversial if you're monumentally stupid. Oh, monumentally, see what I did there? Nor the way these monuments make people feel can change the fact that the statues pay homage to the Civil War. It wasn't a civil war, but I digress. The judge in his ruling also cited state codes saying it is illegal for municipalities to remove such monuments. He says, I find this conclusion inescapable. It is the very reason the statues have been complained about from the beginning. It does no good pretending they are something other than what they actually are. The former chair of the city's Blue Ribbon Commission on Race, Memorials, and Public Spaces, Don Gathers, said he disagreed with the judge's ruling because it re-traumatizes a city. Excuse me, you social justice warrior nitwit. A city is not a living, breathing thing. People are traumatized. And if you find a statue sitting there minding its own business, memorializing individuals that lived quite some time ago, traumatizing, you need a mental health checkup. He says just because something is legal doesn't mean it is right or it's moral. I would like to know what his take on abortion is, by the way. He says, I'm fearful what this has done is giving the vile evilness that descended upon us in August of 2017 to come back. The judge's ruling comes almost 2 years after white nationalists gathering that, and this is the thing. They do not let any crisis go to waste. These statues, these monuments have been in their sights since the Mother Emanuel shooting. And I submit to you, even sooner, they were just looking for a reason. Nikki Haley was quick to jump on the bandwagon and take the Confederate flag down from state property. By the way, MSNBC is saying that Trump would do well to put her as his running mate. I will cut off my arm before I use it to vote for that hag. Anyway, so here's my take right now. I am a proponent of local governance and decisions to be made on a local basis. I really am. Here we have a state having to capitulate now, or I'm sorry, municipality capitulating to a state judge. This is really a microcosm of states capitulating to Washington, D.C. But we have municipalities we know are subordinates of the state. So there is a difference, but that doesn't address the fact that we have taking away of a local decision. The problem with that is, and I've said this before, the people that tend to gravitate to these positions of power often tend to be the social justice controlling types who are going to find these statues and monuments offensive because they are what? They are ignorant. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Would you gentlemen care to chime in at all?
I would agree that anyone who is upset at a statue of a war veteran or a horse needs serious therapy. There's no doubt about it. I don't know how you can go through life and be offended by inanimate objects. We've had this discussion before. Anthropomorphism is a trend that people assign living abilities and values to inanimate objects all the time in order to mask the argument and transition the argument into something that can't be refuted from their perspective. And when you cut through all of that garbage and you cut through that type of a very superficial deception, you get down to the truth of the matter is, and the truth of the matter is that, well, these people need therapy. If they're upset looking at a statue of something that they have no idea about what really happened and why it was put there, well, then I'm thinking they need to be in a special place. That's all.
I submit to you, William Tecumseh Sherman did far more atrocities to civilians than these two generals did, who absolutely would have shot any men under their command who did what Sherman's men did. Yet Sherman, no relation, by the way, is hailed
Good
as,
call.
is hailed as a war hero. But because one side was on the side that legalities were supported them, also their side shows the deference that the general government, which took over and usurped their power, were really the ones that were supposed to be in charge. So this is all about gamesmanship and changing the narrative to favor the what I and Don Livingston refers to as the Lincolnian America, which took place after this war, as opposed to the
I
Jeffersonian America. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I'm going to go in a little bit different direction here because my objection to this whole thing is a notion called public spaces. Where does government have any ability to have public spaces, to own property? We should not be having a government that owns property. This is one of the biggest problems. If people have, it should be private property, and these people, such as Carl and his organization, want a monument to these people, they should put it up on private property. That's my biggest complaint about this whole thing, the whole notion of that government has public spaces and they can control the speech and everything else about space. So eventually what happens is every space is a public space. Everything's owned by government because they decree it. While they've taken our property through property taxes, they've taken our property. Every time we go to work, they're taking our property from us before we even see the proceeds of our labor. So, everything is becoming public property, and that's my biggest complaint about this whole discussion.
That's a great theory, a great insight into this as well. And again, why does government own this property? We have the municipal parks, and again, we all, with our property taxes, have to forcibly contribute to these. There is an organization that has a cheaper way that is making duplicates of these monuments. You can get replicas, and they're using some sort of a resin, and they're beautiful statues, and they will put them up on private property if you so desire. Also, SCV has a plan where for every every flag that is taken down, they plan to put up more per flag, like 2 or more per flag taken down on private property. And there are some flags flying high and proud above public highways on private land that nobody can do anything about. So I thought that was an interesting case. I have my thoughts about it, and Jeff, I think you expounded upon that really well. Before we get into Venezuela, I want to just share, this is something that just came out the other day. Trump and the Democrats agree to pursue a $2 trillion with a T isn't terrible, $1 trillion infrastructure plan. He was standing alongside Speaker Nancy Pelosi. He said this was him and Chucky Schumer, planned to meet again and this is Chuck Schumer saying that they plan to meet again when Trump, sorry about that, I can't turn off the Amazon notifications. Trump was going to tell them how he planned to actually pay for this ambitious project. We have a project, $2 trillion, infrastructure. Trump's going to tell us how we're going to pay for it. This whole thing stinks of a setup. This is going to fall in his lap. It's going to be a miserable failure. And Trump is playing along. Let me refer you back in history to James Madison. Anybody remember him? He liked this infrastructure idea. In fact, he told Congress, let's come up with a plan to improve our roads across the nation. Pardon my French. Congress came up with one. What did he do? He vetoed it because there was no constitutional amendment authorizing it. He vetoed his own bill, the bank bonus bill veto. So now here we have these clowns of the 21st century coming together. Anytime you hear the word bipartisan, that should terrify you. absolutely terrify you. So this is an article. It's from the New York Times. You can see this, and at the end, this was something that was also very interesting to me.
Suzanne?
Yeah.
Doesn't bipartisan mean that they've excluded all the thinking, logical people from the decision?
Yes, yes. The key to the discussion was the willingness of the president, said Senator Thomas Carper of Delaware, the top Democrat on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. By the end of the meeting, he said, I have a responsibility to lead on this front as well, and I'm prepared to do so. This strategy appeared to put the onus, as I said, on Mr. Trump to deliver a real plan and to lock him into the enthusiasm he showed for it in this meeting. Their also article talks about how congenial they were, and they actually mentioned the fact that Donald Trump offered Nancy Pelosi a Tic Tac. Wow, that's really earth-shattering news. Again, $2 trillion, no idea how we're going to come up with it. Please tell me there's a difference in how we vote. The other day, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine in town, and I was so disgusted after the veto of the Yemen resolution. I said, I'm sick and tired of this. We have candidate after candidate that promises to get us out of these wars. And what do we get? The same thing. What does Tom Woods say? No matter whom you vote for, you always get John McCain. And somebody once quipped, well, not anymore. Well, the same effect. So I said, I'm considering switching to the Democrat Party and voting for Tulsi Gabbard in the primaries for the Democrats. And the lady goes, you mean the socialist? I said, who isn't a socialist? And then this story came out. Thomas Jefferson said it is immoral to bind future generations on the debts of the current generation. This is an abysmal, immoral repudiation. You know what? I can't even say this is a campaign promise. He never promised to bring down the debt, but this is a repudiation of what improvements he said he was going to make for our country. Make America great again? How does this make America great? Gentlemen, I'll let you comment, and then we'll get into Venezuela and your analysis of what's going on there.
All right. Well, here's the thing. 2009, Obama passed the recovery and whatever bill, or the Congress and everyone passed it. And it basically was about $1 trillion for infrastructure spending. Let's see, 2015, Congress passes $305 billion infrastructure bill. And I'm just going real quick through a search I did. If you do a search, you're going to find infrastructure bills just about every year forever. They spend trillions and trillions supposedly on infrastructure, and every year they complain that the infrastructure is failing and we need more money. Well, they're spending trillions. Now they want to spend $2 trillion. I was a couple shows ago, I talked about Pennsylvania and their gasoline tax. The Republicans in the Assembly and the Senate and the governor signed it into law. So it was Republicans that foisted it on us, the highest gasoline tax in these United States. And they were talking about almost about $4.5 billion in the last 3 years or 4 years since the gas tax went into effect. That has disappeared. No infrastructure has been fixed, and they're complaining that if they'd spent all that money, everything had been fixed already, and we would have no problem with our infrastructure. Well, the money's gone. They spent it on other things. It's just a microcosm of the Washington, D.C. They spend all this money, supposedly, but it never goes to what they say it's going to go to. And here we are, trillions in debt, and now they're going to add another couple trillion in debt, and we're going to end up in where we are now. Nothing's fixed. So it's time for a peaceful separation.
Jeff, I'm surprised. You seem to be rather upset about this.
Oh, the gasoline tax here in PA just really annoys the heck out of me. Because and you can thank the Republicans for it. The Republicans did that to the citizens of Pennsylvania. Everyone's always complaining about the Democrats and taxes. No, they're both equally bad. They're both two sides of the same Marxist coin. The only thing they're interested in is their own wealth and their own power. They are not there for you. They are there for themselves, and they lie if they tell you anything different.
I am shocked. I am totally taken aback because nothing's changed. Now, Trump was a Democrat, right? Now he's a Republican. And we've had senators in Vermont and other places that changed from Republican to Democrat. And, well, heck, we still have the same thing, and that's exactly what you're saying. It's a one party, two party system, is what it is.
Check this out. The article also says, indeed, Mr. Schumer and Ms. Pelosi made it clear before the meeting that a deal must include funding to curb rising planet warming emissions and protect against its effects. So now he's going to capitulate on climate change. Do not tell me this is chess. If only the supposed Republicans stood up to the Democrats have been kicking and screaming and having a temper tantrum ever since the election results of 2016. What do? We give them everything they want. Pelosi's also been warning the party against impeachment. I think this is payback, and I think there's an implied threat there. She could change her mind if he doesn't go with her. Would it be successful? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm absolutely disgusted by this whole debacle.
You know, we're quickly going down the same road as Venezuela on all this money borrowing and everything.
Let's go with Venezuela.
I mean, well, actually, on this, we're quickly going down the same road. I mean, if you look at it,
we're way past going.
Yeah,
we're 22 trillion in debt already. We're way past Venezuela. We're just lucky that the Federal Reserve is able to print money to bail everything out to keep it going for now, which is eventually going to stop.
I think Booker's talking about the social disorder part.
All of it. I mean, you really look at it, the entire thing. And all this social disorder, I mean, you really look at it on the statutes. Just before we get on Venezuela, I'll talk about something. Putin, it's been verified, he hired one of the nation's leading playwrights to actually develop the concept of what type of political environment they wanted, with all of these opposing people or opposing groups arguing, emotionally charged over things that really and truly don't matter, like statues, to divide the people and continually change the truth and get the people to actually disengage from all the politics and everything out of frustration and just stick their head in the sand. And it appears we have exactly the same thing going on here. Well, I mean, yeah, we do. That they do in a lot of banana republics, which is going to make us, as a joke I made earlier, we're going to be a genetically modified corn republic as opposed to a banana republic. That's the crops that we grow are going to be basically the only difference.
Say that again. A genetically modified corn.
Yeah, we're going to be a genetically modified corn republic because our climate doesn't allow us to grow bananas. But yeah.
Well, we can consume the heck out of some bananas.
Yeah. It's like you look at all the stuff, you can sit there and go, look at the wealth of our nation. How are we in debt to the level we're at? I mean, it gets into this thing. Nobody ever asked the right question. You never hear anybody just go, how? How is this happening? For example, I mean, you look at Venezuela. I pulled this off Wikipedia. And, this is the question. How are they in debt? I mean, they're the third largest coal producer in Latin America. Okay. They're the largest oil producer in South America. They are the third largest coal producer, but on oil reserves, they have the biggest reserves in South America, and they're sixth in the world. They're also sitting atop the second largest gold reserve on the entire planet in the what's called the Orinoco Arc. I mean, they're rich in bauxite, like 5.2 million tons of it.
Yep.
14.6 million tons of iron ore they're sitting on top of. I remember when I was working out there at Goody, that hydroelectric plant where they're having all the trouble to put holes in the ground because of the iron ore. We actually had to blast. I mean, to put fence posts up, we had to blast with 15-pound shape charges into the iron ore. I mean, that's just how rich the country is. But yet here they are setting on over $100 billion in foreign debt that we can track. Now, how did they get there? That's the whole thing. That's the question we've got to ask. How did they get there and why?
And you can add on to that, are we on that same path?
Yes, clearly we are on the same path. And, it's like we talked about yesterday to kind of set the stage for what would they get out of a regime change in Venezuela. We can look at the Ukraine.
I think that's a good. Yeah, I think that's a good analogy, because the Ukraine started out as a non-issue. So, folks, if you're not familiar with the problems in the Ukraine, we can go back. I can give you a little history. Berger can talk a little bit about the current stuff here. But the Ukraine was a relatively quiet place overall for ever since the breakup of the Soviet Union. And then a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we decided that we wanted to force our hand into the Eastern European power market and get ourselves on the map, start selling our oil, because, go figure, we have some of the largest oil reserves in the world right here in these here United States. So we wanted to play a little bit there. And Putin told Barack Hussein Obama, no, you're not going to play. This is my market. I own it. Well, President Obama had a hissy fit. And the hissy fit led us down the road to us sending some of the highly skilled people that we paid for with taxpayer dollar to undermine the government in the Ukraine. Now, these folks came from the Central Intelligence Agency. It's in the news. You can go look it up and find it yourself. Otherwise, Junkbond here wouldn't be talking about it. Junkbond would be spending time in jail. But they went there. They destabilized the government. They caused it to collapse. And the issues in the Crimea, again, were compounded on top of everything, because they've been traditionally aligned with Russia, but we broke them off and kept them with Ukraine. And so it looked like it was a very strange Putin power play to bring them back over to being friends with Russia, when that wasn't the case at all. You remember what we said yesterday? The director of Central Intelligence said, if the American people end up believing all of the deceptions that we put out there, then we will have succeeded. Well, you're getting lied to again about what happened in Ukraine and how it happened. The energy market went to kaplooey, and it led to us having to get involved in Syria, because the Iranian pipeline that Iranians and the Russians worked together, and the Iranian pipeline was coming through Damascus and heading up to supply Eastern Europe with what? With petroleum products, oil. This was going to supplement, and Iran, and Russia, Russian leaders all working together, were going to provide more energy to Eastern European nations. Did they have a lock on the market? Yes. Did they charge outrageous prices? No. They weren't any crazier than anybody else. But because we couldn't allow that part to happen, because that would undermine our undermining of them undermining what President Obama wanted to do, we had to intervene in Syria and make a ruckus. This is why we're in Syria today. This is why we have special forces training one group of terrorists, and this is why we have the CIA training the other groups of terrorists, and they're fighting each other, and Syria is unstable. The instability has stopped all of the production of the oil lines going to Eastern Europe. We won that little temporary victory. But in doing so, we've taken it to the point where we've left Ukraine in complete instability. And we've left, I don't know how many dead in Syria. Why? Because we had an elected king get upset and start whining about the fact that we weren't going to be able to play in the Eastern European energy market.
Yeah, and you look at a lot of this stuff. It's I look at it. These countries that have the mineral wealth and rely on it for income. It's kind of, you get into like the fracking industry. Remember when they dropped the price of oil down to the level that the fracking industry, it was no longer cost effective for them? Yep. Okay, as soon as it went below that threshold, the same oil producing countries like Saudi Arabia, US, other people, and other oil producing countries, they start buying up the fracking industry. Okay, they take the prices down to where they get into economic trouble so they can actually buy up the real wealth, because these people are losing the monopoly game of paying back, the contracts with the useless money that the money, the game's being played with on this. And I see, the same thing going on, as we keep bouncing back and forth between global events, but because it all ties in with Venezuela, it's being repeated. Like, do you remember when we had the illegal government change in Ukraine, that we backed? What was one of the first things the new government needs? Loans. Okay, right away, hey, it's an excuse to loan them money. What gets put up as collateral? That nation's actual real resource wealth
gets ripped right out from under them. Every time we do a regime change, that's what it's called. And that's why we put our people in place here and there. Anybody have any idea on how much in loans we've given to Iraq in the last 10, 15 years? The number will knock your socks off. We have loaned them hundreds of billions of dollars. Hundreds of billions. And they're still, at the end of the day, I don't think they're still going to be our friends. Even though we did all this nice, what would you call it, I guess, housekeeping stuff for them.
Yeah, another thing, those loans were just, they were not given without some sort of collateral to secure them. And, hey, that they're going to default. I mean, it's insanity on this. If, for example, Venezuela is having trouble making the payments that are on their current debt, how is assuming another, okay, right now they estimate Venezuela's outstanding debt to be $140 billion. That's the outstanding debt. Now, how in the world?
Which is funny because we can do that in one. We can do that in one highway bill.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you're looking up. Wow, you know what I mean? How in the world, are they going to get this under control when they're borrowing more money? They can't make the payments on the loans they already have. But I think, once again, that's through intentional mismanagement.
Sure, that's by design, but it's completely by design. They're not allowed to recover and access the wealth that's in their country in order to make them. I mean, Venezuela could be operating under the Saudi Arabia model. And I'm not talking religious wise. I'm talking that they have so much wealth available that they're paying all of their citizens a certain percentage of the profit sharing. That's how much money Saudi Arabia's made so far since the 30s, since we opened up the oil market there, or since the UK did. Now, Venezuela is sitting on, like you said, Booger, tons and tons of wealth, but they're not accessing it. They're taking out loans. They've been taking out loans. They have no way, without digging in and accessing the natural resources that they have in that country, they have no way of being able to dig themselves out. And like you said, it is by design. And it's by design because Venezuela, with all those natural resources, could have become much more of a player in the world economic market. But one of those really cool things, the Monroe Doctrine, allows us to go down there and intervene and keep them down. And essentially, that's what we're doing. We're keeping them down so that they cannot raise up to the level of international player. Because why? Because we're the biggest, baddest dog in the Western Hemisphere. That's how we've kept our dominance over every country in Latin America since the late 1800s. We've used the Monroe Doctrine, and we've used the concept of helping and protecting to keep them all down.
You know, we have the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. We are taught in school simply protected American interests in these regions from foreign government intervention. Where is the constitutional authority to these doctrines? I mean, once again, here we have a grossly exaggerated, powerful office of the president. And then compare that to the power delegated to this office in Article 2. Very little. Brian McClanahan has a really good book, The Founding Fathers Guide to the Constitution. And he very clearly explains that the role is really to just enforce the laws that Congress comes up with. He signs them into law. He enforces them. One of the issues I see with the Holy Parchment here is the president has the option of addressing Congress with policy suggestions in the State of the Union address. This has become mutated into a presidential platform. And what is the president going to do? Well, the president's not supposed to do any of this stuff, but mere suggestions have turned this office into an elected, not only leader, a monarch, and the ruler of the free world. This is insanity at its finest, which would not have been possible but for the signing and ratification of the Constitution.
Well, I got a article here. This kind of fits in with some of the stuff you guys are talking about there, Junk Bond and Booger. This is from Reuters, April 30th. Republicans and Democrats, U.S. senators blast President Donald Trump's proposal for a 23% cut to the U.S. budget for foreign aid and diplomacy. And it was a picture of Lindsey Graham. And it's Lindsey Graham. We're not going to approve this budget reduction. It's insane. That's Lindsey Graham. So here we are. They're taking the money. They take it from us, and they're sending it all over the world. And again, I know, Booger, you're really big into the big international banking cartel. Well, you know, who's getting rich off this? Probably the international banking cartel.
You know, another symptom of this, too, is going to be a self-created refugee crisis if we destabilize this region as well. And that's going to feed into the Democrat plan because they can get them in here. And guess which way they're going to vote?
Oh, yeah, there is a crisis, refugee crisis surrounding all the countries down there in Venezuela. I mean, with all the countries that surround Venezuela, major refugee crisis going on in Panama down there right now. Um, and also the money laundering, okay, because these loans that the government is getting, and we covered this on our first show with Venezuela. The deal is, hey, you get these loans, pay us back, keep the payments, okay, until we tell you to default, because eventually they're going to want them to default, because what they really want is access, our ownership of the mineral wealth of Venezuela. I mean, we've talked about it. The world's second largest gold deposit. They will, but the people that are down there, Maduro, we covered how his stepsons were connected with that guy that ended up going to jail, 1.2 billion, money laundering out of their petroleum, their state-run petroleum company. I mean, this whole thing on this is they just get in there, they get the loans, okay, they filter as much money as they can off, and then they make the payments. And one of the things I find so interesting on this is, we covered Venezuela's outstanding debt that we know of is 140 billion. In gold holdings alone that they have just sitting in foreign banks, it's kind of like a security issue. They have 27.9 billion, and this actually came yesterday. It came out in the Latin American Herald on this. Also, yesterday, they sold or it was reported yesterday, 15 tons of gold to the UAE for euro digits in the computer. So instead of using their gold direct, just making, say, a Venezuelan gold certificate, which remember what happened to Gaddafi when he was going to make money that's actually backed by something besides thin air? He went bye-bye.
Yeah, he gone.
Yeah, he quickly left the scene, and not in a pleasant manner. Kind of like that warning to anyone who tries to make money actually based on something that's worth that has value. Okay, why would they sell 15 tons of gold, or trade it actually for useless euros? Okay, why not just make a gold certificate, Venezuelan gold certificate, as opposed to selling that gold and actually use that? Or just use the gold itself to buy what you need. But see, whenever they get a loan, for example, China, what was it, loaned them $5 billion of useless digits in a computer to have ownership of $5 billion worth of the world's sixth largest oil reserves at 20 cents on the dollar.
Right.
And yes, I mean, that's the way the game's played. Instead of selling the petroleum, okay, or selling the gold on the international market and making the money you need, you get a loan first, okay, and collateral on that collateral is the actual real wealth. And then the plan is to default on that later on when the leaders are told to do so. And
Right, when the time's right. Yep.
yeah, when the time is right. And then, you have your little regime change, which we're kind of getting into down there. And I see something interesting that shows we may be getting ready to have a regime change down there, because they are, I mean, just because I look at the economics on it, not just, okay, what military forces are where. You look at that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they have 160 to 180 tons of gold abroad, okay, that they are said that they're going to bring in to call back into Venezuela. They plan on calling back in 85%. This is out of the Latin American Herald as well. They plan on bringing in back in 85% of the gold holdings that they have throughout the world. Now, you bring in that 85% right before a regime change, and what do you have? You have the ability to ask for more loans.
Yep. When you're gonna affect the international market too. The prices in the international market will fluctuate. It's the same type of here. Let me ask the question here, folks. Do you think that with a straight face, do you think that the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates in your best interest so you can buy a house, so you can have the flexibility of moving around the country and buying a great, wonderful property.
I'll go with that's a negative Ghost Rider.
Yeah, it's absolutely Ghost Rider. Absolutely not. The only incentive that they have in lowering interest rates is to coax people into purchasing more properties that what they can't afford. You're buying a $200,000-$300,000 house, you're going to pay $300,000-$500,000 in interest over 30 years. The table is stacked against you. How can you create real wealth for yourself if you're giving away 70% up front? Do you think that they don't know that? And the same thing here in Venezuela. The international gold market will reflect the activity. You watch it. And you're going to see that these guys will default on their loans because that's how wealth is transferred. No matter how much money you paid into your house, if you default on your mortgage payments for 4, 5, 6 months or so, you lose the whole thing. You don't get to keep like the kitchen. You lose the whole thing. The bankers have everything to gain, everything to win from a regime or from a, I hate using that term regime change. It makes it sound like I'm a Democrat or Republican. Leadership change. Okay. They have everything to gain from a change in leadership in one country or another. Again, another reason to retain such a high level of instability throughout Latin America and the Middle East. The ability to gobble up all of the natural resources and true wealth and true assets around the world by them defaulting on phony loans.
Greg, can I ask a question?
No, go ahead.
Because I'm sure I'm assuming that there's other people out there that have this question because I think about it. So we have, what is it, Maduro on one hand, and I don't know the other guy's name. Is
Guaido.
there, what is it?
It's Guaido, or depending on how you want to pronounce it.
Okay. Is there substantially a difference between these two guys? I'm sure there's a lot of people wonder that very thing because, okay, so are they both socialists? Are are we trading one socialist for another socialist, or are we getting a Thomas Jefferson and a socialist? You understand where I'm going with this question? Is there any difference really?
Quick interjection is the difference we're seeing is being created by the media with the graphic image of Maduro's military vehicles plowing through a crowd. Would Guaido's guys do anything different? I don't know. But once again, we are fueling the emotions and the passions of
Right.
people who will hold this administration in judgment, and then he can behave accordingly once they've paved the way for that.
So here's a quick answer, Jeff. You're not allowed to have a Thomas Jefferson. You can't have someone that would have any country stand alone or be an innocent. The war against communism and socialism, although bad, makes a justified concept in people's minds that we need to fight it. In doing so, we allow ourselves the opportunity to become the police of the world and to consistently undermine governments throughout the world in order to bring, quote, democracy to the world. It's a fight that we can continue to engage in because we're keeping, well, pretty much every country in the world in an environment of instability. Do you think any of the socialists or dictators that we've deposed in the last, let's say, just 30 years now, are their replacements any better? Well, they could be maybe a little bit better, maybe a lot better. But we still have a very high certainty that each of those economic and social conditions in all of the countries that we're talking about are just as bad as they were. The number of emerging countries, as identified by the United Nations since they started keeping track back in the 50s, I think it was. And these are countries that are third world nations that are moving up to first world status per se because of technology, social culture, class status, all that other stuff. The number has actually grown since the 50s. Saudi Arabia is one of the countries that's listed as an emerging nation. Think about that. One of the wealthiest countries in the world is getting UN assistance because it's an emerging nation. No, it's all a Ponzi scheme. It's all a game, and we are just not invited to the table. We're intelligent enough to sit out here and go, "Oh, this is all a bunch of BS." They're just moving parts. And look at these guys over here getting rich. And we've been cursed with that. We're smart enough to know what's going on, and we have listeners who understand that. And we have to somehow get that message to the people that don't understand that you are lower than a pawn in that chess game of life. You have absolutely no status, no standing. You're just forced to watch. And I don't think you'll ever have a Thomas Jefferson emerge in any of these countries, especially in Venezuela this time, next time, or the time after that. What's the next country in Latin America to fall? I don't know. But I can tell you this, they're not going to have a Thomas Jefferson at the helm when they reemerge back at the international table.
We'll never have one either. you know, I wanted to share a comment that I had read. It's as part of the discourse on this topic. And I found this very frightening that we never learned our lesson because the term this person used with regards to Venezuela and this ongoing coup, I hope we don't see a domino effect in Latin America. That sent chills up my spine because as we know, that domino theory was used to justify the debacle known as Vietnam. Oh my gosh, Suzanne, this is what I'm told. Are we supposed to tell the Vietnam veterans that this was a waste of time? Yes, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. It really was. It's time to call these intervention, these wars what they are. They were non-defensive. It was a proxy battle with Russia. We are seeing Russia and China start to have some interaction here. I think the moral of the story is if you are a third world country with vast resources, be scared. Be very, very scared. Kind of like a prepper. Hide your stuff. Don't talk about it. Unfortunately, it's hard for them to do. I don't know how they can avoid this stuff.
I got into looking at the sanctions also on this. The sanctions, in reality, all the sanctions are doing. There were banks that were using, and this was American taxpayers' 401ks that the funds were to be connected to, were buying up Venezuelan gold and oil bonds, okay, at pennies on the dollar. But the situation is the international bankers do not want us to benefit from buying up the resources at pennies on the dollar. So we come up with sanctions. But the IMF, all of these other guys have loopholes where they can still deal directly with Venezuela. It's just the investment firms that are trying to get a good gain on investments for people's 401ks. They're the people that get hit by the sanctions. But the IMF, all these other big banks have loopholes where they can still go through and deal directly with Venezuela.
Speaking of the IMF, I Am I correct? And what two buildings bookend the White House? IMF and the Federal Reserve, if I am correct.
I'll go take a look. I don't travel to Mordor much these days. I try to get it out of my blood.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, I'm not saying that as a fact, but if I recall correctly, that is, and don't think we have all those little underground tunnels under there. So, you also mentioned something else that our listeners do understand this, but what we're trying to do is not have an echo chamber here. And we have
Right.
changed people's thinking. We challenge people. It is imperative if you like this show, if it makes you think, if it's something that you're not hearing on other news outlets. There's a reason you're not hearing it on other news outlets. They don't want you to ask these questions. They don't want you to have this information. Asking you, please share our page. Tell people if you like it, why you got to listen to this stuff. We are really in an uphill battle with the tech giants and their algorithms and their ranking and their whatever wizardry they have to silence voices such as ours. So I want to thank everybody that has just been so evangelical, if you will, with our message and what we're trying to do here. And if we encourage more, we really appreciate it. Go ahead, jump on.
I appreciate everybody. I really do. I think it's tough to sit sometimes and listen to things that are not pleasant to hear. I know that I was wasting my time when I went into Iraq. I know that now. I didn't know that then. I learned. I learned that everything that happened was just to assist the international banking cartel, as Booger puts it, so very pleasantly, help them in their mission. And that was to steal my wealth. And I was an active participant chanting USA, USA, USA. And now that I look back at it, it hurts. It really does, to think that some people are so cold and heartless that they will sacrifice you and your children for their own personal wealth.
I'm trying to come up with when we had a war that this government was involved in that was truly defensive. And people accuse us of not being patriotic.
1812.
Yes, thank you very much. People accuse me of not being patriotic. That's really why I wrote that article published by the 10th Amendment Center called The Church of the National Government. We talk about the God versus government worshipers all the time. I was sharing the past couple of shows that we've had past couple episodes about a gentleman who had bragged about the fact that he made a gal cry because of her faith, calling it a fairy tale. Yet when they played the national hymn, okay, I don't want to be disrespectful, the national anthem, he stood there and put his hands over his heart, took his hat off, put it over his heart, and stood there respectfully for the song. And then told me to take my hat off. I just politely walk away. So the point is, what do you really worship? And by the way, if you are that patriotic, go ahead and enlist. Go ahead. If you're that patriotic, don't admonish others for not being as patriotic as you are. Put it on the line and sign up for this army and go fight for these causes that you may or may not come home, and then ask yourself, was it worth it? I remember it was some talk show host that was excoriated the media for asking one of these heroes, I forgot which one it was, do you think your friends died in vain? And it's an uncomfortable question to ask, but we're going to have to ask it because our government is addicted to warfare. When you know somebody who is addicted, do you enable them by supplying them with more of what they need to feed their addiction? I submit to you, no. Sounds like we are out of time. I want to thank everybody on behalf of Greg Junkbon Carpenter and Booger and Jeff Johnson here at the Cerberus Radio Network. We thank you for listening. God bless you. Have a great day.